Now, I think it is clear than ever that Arsenal needs signings to rejuvenate the squad and actually start performing to our level. Now, instead of talking about the game yesterday, we're going to go into big reports that Arsenal's director of football has been decided, it looks like finally, and it is returned for an icon at the club. So let's get into it. Now, first of all, I think this is one of the most annoyed times in my life at Arsenal, especially recently, because I just think we should have expected this to come all the times, and the fans, a lot of them do know about it. For ages we have had the ability of getting better and improving, but we just have taken ourselves out of the picture in the last 12 months, not making the right decisions and being too passive when we've needed to be, and I'm very disappointed with the club. And the loss against Newcastle, I just think epitomised that. Now we're going to be out of the Carabao Cup, another trophy not won. Now, it's not a trophy I ultimately care about, but it is important to win trophies, and with the big issues being that we created over 3 XG, only around a 0.8 of shots actually on target, and didn't take our chances. When you look at teams like Newcastle, who are tactically and throughout the squad a lot worse than us, able to beat us easily because they will take their chances, it just isn't good enough. Now, instead of talking about the game any further, let's go into the big report that Arsenal have spoke to their new director of football reportedly. Now, we've done videos on many people that they could sign, and it looked like Olebi was going to be the main choice and probably would be one of my first choices, to be honest, but it doesn't look like that is happening because it is being reported heavily by sources such as Ed Aarons and Nick Ames from The Guardian that Arsenal are in talks with Tomas Rosicky, as he is the leading candidate to become Arsenal's new sporting director. Now, I don't need to get into who Tomas Rosicky is because a lot of you will know him. Obviously, he did really well at Arsenal before, Super Tom, of course, and even though he had a lot of injury problems at Arsenal, I think he's a person that a lot of the fans really hold dear to their heart because he was quite good in a period where Arsenal were top 4 but weren't really pushing to do anything special, and Tomas Rosicky was a great player in that time. Now, straight away you're going to see the same similarities with someone like Olebi anyway. It's someone that Arteta knows very well. Of course, they played with each other here, but are also sought to be good friends outside of the game, and it kind of lines up with the fact we are just hiring a lot of Mikel Arteta's men and friends, which I don't really have too much of an issue with if it is addressed in the right way. Now, of course, this is not the first time Edu was a former player. Even Per Mertesacker is the head of youth development. He's done a brilliant job down there, to be fair, but it does seem like Arsenal are having this sort of system where some of the main candidates or main figureheads for the club are people that have been played before. Maybe that is a strategy call to bring in trust with the fans, I don't know. Now, first of all, I will say he isn't exactly a newbie at this job. He has been a sporting director for Sparta Prague since 2018, obviously a team that he also played for throughout his career, and he has been overseeing Sparta's revival in recent seasons that have culminated in a return to the Champions League proper this season for the first time since 2005, and they have won the league the past 2 seasons. And they've signed a lot of players. It's quite hard to judge because obviously it's a lot of a lower league and there's a lot of smaller players being signed for a lot less money, so I can't really comment on a lot of these players, but I know a few of them can be quite good in their career. But some of his sales have actually been quite interesting. He sold Hanko to Feyenoord, who I actually think is really good now. He sold Holzek for 30 million euros, which is a good deal for that league, and he hasn't really kicked on at Leverkusen. And he sold a centre forward called Kavankara, who's also a player that he got good money from for Gladbach, who hasn't really done too much just yet. Now, that may show a good level of actually selling players for good value, but it's hard to really judge. Like, is he going to be able to get that amount of money from Arsenal, who are much bigger stature, players are a lot more well known? It's going to be interesting, but obviously that is something that we will look at. But I do think, considering he's had experience for around 5 to 6 years now at doing this, that is quite good. And I think the reports that Arsenal did want other people like Olebi, but Olebi obviously has gardening leave, and then he wants to spend time with his family in the summer, and I think Arsenal are at a point where we cannot wait for players. I've been speaking about it for weeks now. We obviously need to sign players. I think last night showed that more than anything. We need to win games because we do not have the depth. Our team is too thin and we just need more. We can't keep putting it off and waiting because the chances will go, and there will be eventually get to a point where teams get better. Teams like Newcastle sort their financial issues out, Chelsea get better after spending so much money, and Liverpool actually solidify their spot. I know a few players have got to leave, of course, and the problem is Arsenal always went from that team that is ready for other teams to slip up, and it just seems like we are not that team anymore. We cannot rely on our own players a lot of the time to even perform when we have injuries, and without Saka, I genuinely think a lot of the attack is quite useless, which is obviously a problem that Arteta is also to blame for, but the board are as well, and the director of football, of course. Apparently there's rumours that Edu has been sacked and actually didn't leave, which I don't know if is true or not, but I can see that we do need a different recruitment strategy. And this is where Tomas Rosicky does come in, because apparently Tomas Rosicky is a little bit reluctant to leave Sparta Prague mid-season to come to Arsenal, but he is thought to be ready for the new challenge. And with him already having a prior connection with Arsenal, the fans and Arteta, it does seem like something that he would want to do and jump to straight away, which would obviously be a big, massive gain for his career as well. This is why it could be a possibility that Arsenal get this done quite soon, you actually may see, but I don't know how soon that will be, because the transfer window is already a week in. Is it going to happen in this month where we can sign players or not? And I think that is very important. I also think it says a lot about what the team are doing right now. Now, obviously, we have people working on transfers such as Tim Lewis, you've got the chief executive Richard Garlick, and of course Jason Ayton, who is kind of like the interim sporting director right now. But I think a lot of people have been rumoured and said that he doesn't feel like he's up to this job right now, and it seems like Kroenke and some of the other board members are actually coming into the UK to try and sort of come to an agreement on transfers, but it may seem that everyone kind of isn't aligned in the same thinking, which I think is quite bad in this situation. And that is going to be a major concern with Rosicky coming in, I do think. I think people are going to ask questions. Is he going to be too lovey-dovey with Arteta? Are they going to agree on the same things too much? Is there going to be too much of a disconnect there, which I'm not sure there will be. But obviously, I think Rosicky, as a person, when he was at the club, was quite determined. He was quite in his ways. But I don't know who he is and what he's like as a personal sporting director, so that will be a very interesting thing to see. I also think there is concerns about maybe his experience. Sparta Prague aren't exactly the worst team in the world. He's done a brilliant job there. I'm not going to say he hasn't, but it is a massive jump up. And obviously, he kind of knows the stature of the club and the situation, which I think maybe makes it a little bit easier for him to transition into it. But it is just weird how Arsenal still act like a bit of an underdog club. When we got Arteta, we're taking risks on managers, we're taking risks on these sort of people, and I think the Rosicky appointment, if it is to happen, is a big risk. There is big director of footballs out there that we could have got. I may be a Labour, we have to wait a year. I don't really blame us for not waiting, even though I do think he's the best candidate in that regard, but I still think there's great options around Europe. But it just seems like we don't want to act like a club that size, and we just kind of want to do this risky thing that I don't blame us for doing. I'm not against it, but I would have just liked someone with a little bit more top-end experience, because one of the main things for me, at least from a sporting director's perspective, is I want them to be able to convince players to join, have them networks of players that will want to do that. And I think a Labour was a perfect example of someone that has connections to a lot of players that Arsenal already like and could potentially get them to come. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean anything. It's not guaranteed. You can always build them connections over time. But I'm not sure if Rosicky has that, looking at obviously his low-end signings he's made from smaller clubs around Europe compared to them real talents that you have seen. Now, some of the players he has signed have gone on to be good talents, but none of them are really catching the eye too much, especially going forward, which is quite concerning for the future. Now, the club do have their mind of what they want to do for the future, so it's not really the end of the world ultimately. And I do think Arsenal are in a situation now where we just need anyone rather than no one, because I just don't think Jason Ayton is that guy going forward. So I don't really hate it there. I also like how he is a part of Arsenal before. Now, I don't really think that should matter too much, but it will be easier for him to transition, which I mentioned, which could be a bit easier for the team. And Arteta is already going to have that relationship with him there, which I think is something we have kind of gone for quite a lot. Even looking at a Labour and other people that have been linked to us, I think it is something that we have considered a lot more. But even talking about a director of football, the main thing is that Arsenal make signings this January, because not only have we not been playing that well, I think, throughout the season, which I think is fair to say, the injuries, and I don't want to just blame on injuries because there's also a lot of luck and just performance-based issues that we've had. Everything accumulated together has just made us, I don't think, that competitive. We're arguably out of the Carabao Cup already now, which was pointless even getting to the semis. I always say this, like, I just don't care about that cup unless you win it, and we look tired and we look miserable. The team just doesn't look like they want to play or can play. Maybe them illnesses and the physical problems are also there, but we're playing games every 3 to 4 days with the same players that were backups for most of last year, and I just think, especially in attack, it is not good enough, and it's clearly shown that we can't last any longer like this. Not only, like I said, about the league, I said we've got to buy players to focus on other cups, but it doesn't even seem like that's going to happen. I think Arsenal fans right now have such a great frustration about the club, and I genuinely think it is fair. I think there's been points this season where there's maybe been a little bit of an overreaction, which I have mentioned, but the failure to actually buy an attacking player over the last few years is kind of stupid. We should have bought someone, and I'm not saying it has to be a striker, it just has to be any winger. We have literally bought no attackers under Arteta who have actually been effective. The only person that's actually a forward we've bought who is Trossard and Jesus, and that is it. And even then, they're not perfect, and probably both will be sold in the summer. I mean, at least one of them's going, I have to think, which I just show is a damning precedent evident of what has happened in his time at Arsenal with the signings. And I do think that this project has been so good, but it has stagnated now, I think, for a while. And I think the failure of a lot of the team and the board and everyone not to really push to get to that final level has been disappointing. And if they don't sort it out, in my opinion, in the next 6 months, then it could all unravel in front of our eyes, which I obviously do not want. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments about Tomas Rosicky being appointed. And if not, I'll see you in the next one.